Okay, greetings. We're now about to go live. Welcome to the channel. This is at Dorsey's Resource 873. This is the new channel. The topic of this video is going to be GCR wealth transfer question mark. Is it really about to happen this time? Depending on how many views we get, I wanted to do a video to give my weigh in, my assessment. I want to first, before I get started going deep into the video, I want to give a big shout out to those who have continued to follow the channel throughout the years, despite the fact I don't go live or do videos as much anymore. But thank you for staying loyal. Those who continue to rock with me, you are appreciated. This is the newer channel, even on the older channel that had been shadow banned. Thank you guys for continuing to rock with me over there. If you did migrate over here, depending on how things go, I may shift gears later, maybe today in the future, and do a video over there. I felt the need because it was about a couple weeks ago. I want to say approximately, I looked at the date from one of my contacts. It was around April 21st. I just wanted to give my weigh in where they sent me a video, and I actually didn't watch the full entire video because it was over 2 hours long. A lot of people, different people I know, send me things, and I appreciate that. But overall, I can get, you can get bombarded with lots of information nowadays. But I just wanted to give my weigh in, my assessment. I don't know how long this video may be. Give a little background about my knowledge pertaining to the GCR, stands for Global Currency Reset. In case you are not aware, it goes back many years ago. Some people refer to it as a different name. Some people, and you say in the religious community, refer to it as the wealth transfer. I had a close friend of mine that when he heard about Klaus Schwab's mention of the Great Reset, he thought that that was in relation, that the evil cabal wants to have like their own version. But what I can say to bring everything, to tie everything together, because you have different groups out there, you've got different movements, but there are certain things, information I've listened to throughout the years that have remained the same. Generally speaking, if you follow me, I try to keep things on a mundane level. I don't want to get too esoteric, get too far out of sight, out of mind, where people cannot digest information, where people can't understand. But where my background related to this information, how I started to connect the dots many years ago, I've already done previous videos on this. I have been censored. I've been shadow banned. I've been reported. You could say the whole 9 yards. It's one of the reasons you can say why I don't do videos as much. And a couple weeks ago, when my friend of mine told me, someone I know, one of my sources out of state, I was kind of inclined to do a video, but then years ago, I don't really get excited anymore. One of the reasons I'm doing this video is someone I was messaging with the other day. I haven't spoken to in person for a while, but we text from time to time, message each other, and she, felt, I guess she was getting, it appears as though what I was reading from the text message, she was getting frustrated why this has continued to go on and on for a number of years. So she sent me a video and wanted to get my weigh in. And I hadn't mentioned, because I feel like when you send texts to people back and forth, I can't really go as in depth with my emotions or accentuate what someone shared with me. I would have to share certain things verbally if we talk over the phone. By the way, I can go more in depth. But I know I have a tendency sometimes to be long-winded. This information can get very in depth. And it was related to certain things from the video, the brief video she sent me that a guy did. It was related to cryptocurrencies. And that's a whole nother topic within itself, because some people that I know personally, I've spoken with, even myself years ago, I was not a big fan of crypto, to be honest, by the way. I was I won't go maybe as in depth about that because that's neither here nor there for the time being. But there is a connection to the new banking system that is being planned. There is truth to those that have heard about, of course, XRP. More people have, a lot more people have found out about that, by the way. And if you do make the right moves, I've just kind of got burned out throughout the years. I actually got rid of majority of all my XRP last summer, which I know it's a bad move. I did plan to kind of buy back in, but I kind of lost my motivation. I've been basically worn down. I've been part of this for years, so my fight is different from people. A lot of newbies or people that have come into this information. I've been knowing about, let's say, for example, the Iraqi dinars since 2006. I would say officially, I didn't purchase my first set of Iraqi dinars until sometime around February or March of 2011. And I do have a good memory to a degree. I can remember back that far. But I used to attend, to give a little background about myself, meetings by invitation only in the so-called sovereign citizen movement. I don't use the term or profess to be a sovereign citizen. I am still not free yet. There's still certain contracts that I am tied into. I've been fighting to become free for a long time. I have been very, very close. I call it in this redemption education. I'll give it other names. Some may call it status correction. Some people have given it the name diplomatic immunity. But when you start using terms like that, then you have to have your stuff together, be all the way out. One of the things I've identified many years ago, they use the banking monetary system. Debt is their weapon to keep you in control when you understand how these contracts work. A lot of people I met, very intelligent people, the way this information is structured, are still not able to get a whole grasp the concepts or think that people that study this type of information are a part of a cult or part of secret societies or crypto religions, and I can touch on that. I am not part of any of that stuff. I am free to go, and nobody ever put me up to this. But I'm not saying you don't have instances where people have been persuaded or influenced by different groups, crypto religions, or secret societies or organizations. And some people just learn about this information through word of mouth. Not everybody's circumstance or situation has been the same. Oftentimes people form these preconceived notions. I have a close friend of mine where his buddy that I actually know down the road, he kind of shared with me, had a preconceived notion that he said, oh, he must be studying with the Moors or whatever, or he's with the Moorish Science Temple. He only heard a little bit of information, but it was not related. There's two different things, because what you have going on nowadays, there's people part of different organizations, I'll say different groups, and some of them are even 501c3 nonprofits where people got a hold of access to bits and pieces of information. They may not have the full portion. Whereas myself, I started off, you could say, with ground level, surface level information. And I learned tremendously a lot more down the road when I had my older cousin that still currently lives in the DC area told me about these events that I attended over a decade ago. I referred to in the previous video, some of which I removed from YouTube. I was kind of, you could say, bullied into it when the individual from the group resurfaced, and they were threatening to not get me funded and things of this sort. Then I was eventually told at one time that I was kicked out. I was no longer allowed. When he resurfaced, I referred to that as a private clandestine operation that was known as at the time, when I found out, was the early part of 2009. But I had heard of this individual a prior year back in 2008, I was working with a consumer advocacy group, a consumer advocacy agency that was a branch of meetings that I used to attend privately by my own will, known as, so-called sovereign citizen group or whatever, privately in the city of Detroit at the time. And there were other groups that broke out when this information went viral. There were people studying UCC. Didn't mean everybody was not connected. Even when the FBI did an investigation on the group, they said they even discovered down the road that everybody from these different cell groups or organizations, it was not a cohesive group. There were different people that had, different ideology. I can go in depth because I actually studied in the movement. There was people that had different pieces or bits of information, and people were at different levels. Not everybody was on the same type of level, and this type of information is unconventional. This type of information is not taught in college universities. By the way, I was told by one of my private sources, put it, in a very good context, and I started doing more research down the road to discover that this information was like kind of encrypted in a way in a college class called business law. And I did a video talking about that a while ago. I don't remember which video on my other channel specifically, where I was downtown at a particular bookstore, very close or near, you could pretty much say downtown Detroit. It was a bookstore that's been around for quite a while, should be still there, called John King Bookstore. And it's been a while since I've been down there, but a friend of mine, someone I was with, wanted to check out the books because they actually give away free books. Like they have a lot of stuff, like when you first walk in, and there was these different racks at the time, and I was going through the different racks of books, and I was searching, and I happened to stumble across this particular book. Looked like it was the workbook of a hardback book. You know how if you ever taken college classes before, for certain classes, you would have a hardback book and you would have like a workbook that would go along with it, like pages you could take notes on or rip out. It would kind of be like where you would do like the hands-on. They would go over with what you read in a hardback book. Well, this particular book was just the paperback, or looked like, the workbook version of the book Business Law. So I did more research on it and discovered a lot of the chapters and information was related to information in the so-called sovereign citizen movement. For example, this book talked about UCC1 financing statements, and the name of the chapter was referred to as secure transactions. So when I did some research on my own and I cross-referenced, I looked up PDF files online. No one put me up to this. I was curious because I'm a very inquisitive person, and I wanted to find out more and do further investigation, further research. And I found out there was other books that I downloaded. They were generally the same across the board. The books, Business Law, it might be called Business and the Law, or just Business Law itself, written by different authors or whatever. I'm assuming. I believe I was due to take this course when I was in college. I just finished with my associate's degree. I did take credits towards my bachelor's before I actually graduated. At the time, there's a whole story why I was not able to finish at the time. I actually used to work at the college I used to attend, and I knew the lady who was the head of the financial aid office at the time. Her name was Zena Skinner, and she told me I had done a loan consolidation and didn't understand what I had done. And she said, "You're not supposed to do that until you're completely finished with school." And at the time, I couldn't take any more loans out and do anything or get any more grants. Completely locked me out. But I was able to take classes, and then I further, after I found that information out that particular summer, I graduated with my associate. But like I said, I was 13 classes exactly away from a bachelor's degree at the time, which was required. My major was management, self-directed management specifically, but your degree will say business administration. So I did look at the curriculum down the road, and I believe I was due to take that course, but it would have been a little bit further down the road. But I learned more in the so-called sovereign citizen movement for example, from my own experience, taught me how to apply and got me in a more serious state of mind when it came to handling my own private business for your own personal domestic duties that we have to go about when we become adults. We take on responsibilities. I would say the so-called sovereign citizen movement trained me, and it opened my eyes up and allowed me to appreciate those classes that I took and understand we were just being taught information that they wanted us to learn to be good slaves in the system, to be basically be obedient, but not learn the real information that the elites or the ruling class elites teach their children. Their children are sent to private schools by invitation only, where they learn the real information. But everyone else in the public, the statutory side, is given the information that they want them to be at a certain level based on your career field or your curriculum. And there's compartmentalization. Like, some people can have an excellent career field and not have no clue or understanding of this information, because that's the compartmentalization factor. So you can say, by me taking a deep dive years ago and learning this information, it made me well-rounded. And like I said, to reiterate, it opened my eyes up and allow me to go more in depth. So, as I was giving an example how the class business law was related to sovereignty, I noticed a connection because it was real big back in the day. People used to say you need to file a UCC1 financing statement to become sovereign. You need to, do this, put a lien over the straw man, etc. Nowadays, we have a lot better information. There's a lot of people, talented people that have come down the road who I don't have a problem admitting that are more advanced than myself. There's people that are more knowledgeable than I am. And there's people that have, in a shorter amount of time, have exited the matrix or are at a more advanced stage or level than I am, by the way. And I do have my theories, some of my theories behind this. I won't say it's necessarily the same for each and every individual, but some individuals did receive help. Some people have just a better understanding. I'll just say they're talented and their abilities and capability with being able to exit the matrix. And some people were born into wealth. It's easier utilizing this information when you can get a concept down if you already have access to a certain amount of capital or currency, because it costs money to file paperwork when you're doing different processes, removing certain contracts, and as you're navigating and learning to protect oneself and put certain properly done certain statutory entities on notice, establishing power of attorney, properly utilizing the correct forms, and like I said, properly navigating. But it's, like I said, it's unconventional information. So when I came about years ago, it wasn't as well put together like it is today. So you can say I come from the generation where we had to get it out more out the mud. We figured it out years ago. A lot of people don't know the history behind this information. There is some history to a degree. There was a book called Cracking the Code years ago. One of the co-authors was Barton Butts, and Dan Benham contributed a lot of work. Barton Butts was an investigative journalist. He actually met with a former Secretary of Treasury, Paul O'Neill, before Paul H. O'Neill left office. As he served Secretary of Treasury years ago, Barton Butts found out extensive information from his research that he done. Now, someone tried to say because Barton Butts had gone to jail, there's people that oftentimes will try to use that and say, like they'll try to throw out all of the research that person has done. I still believe he has done excellent research that he brought to the table, despite that they didn't understand at the time. There were others that he was part of or with when they were doing certain types of negotiable instruments that got them in trouble at that time. That was many years ago when the technology was older compared to today. But a lot of those people put in work where they sacrificed, and they were like the guinea pigs. And as the information got better, people were able to find out what the do's and don'ts and how to effectively implement this information without putting oneself in harm's way or other groups. There were people that were down the road. That's how we had to figure this out from trial and error. But years ago, he did a report and mentioned in this report, it's very eye opening. Even UCVL went over that. If you haven't gotten a chance, you still may be able to find the document. Some people may still have it on backup thumb drives. It's still out there on the internet, I believe, the last time I checked. But like I said, you may have to, it's like one of the types of things you'll have to stumble across it because a lot of websites from years ago, they went down. So that chapter called in business law that dealt with UCC financing statements was called secure transactions. A chapter on negotiable instruments was referred to as commercial paper in this book that was related to negotiable instruments. Generally speaking, if you look up all across the board in business law, the chapter on UCC1 financing statements is going to be called secure transactions. Different books, the chapter is going to be different sections of the book. They're not going to necessarily be, one before the other. The chapter where people file DBAs or fictitious names or trademarks that deal with copyrights. That chapter is going to be called intellectual property. That specific chapter is going to be called intellectual property that deals with when people file fictitious names, DBAs, because your name, your legal person, in the court, they don't call the straw man. They use certain terminology because they have to go by their rules, the court rules. So they have to use legalese. So the judge won't refer with some in the sovereign movement, call it straw man. They'll refer to your in lingus, or they'll use the term legal fiction. Or I've heard some instances legal person. There's even been reports from years ago where some judges were trying to actually help people and say, are you referring to the decedent estate, by the way, because your name, your legal fiction, the in lingus encompasses many different types of entities. It's an organization, and it's an organization that encompasses trade names, trademarks, etc. When you get into understanding, so the concept was when you take control, filing the intellectual property over that name, when you own the name and properly control it, just like someone sues someone and goes after them for trademark infringement, you own the name or the mark. By the way, which was a powerful concept. It was another variation or concept that people use other than filing a UCC1 to put a lien over the estate. Specifically, they would file properly done. And then we even discover some other things down the road, how the court, there is a way, it's encoded how they recognize you as a living, breathing man or woman, by the way, but they have it done in a particular manner. And to some out there that don't believe that this is real, if you look at a lot of your contracts, for example, like your driver's license, your social security card, any types of licenses that you have, or whenever you're doing business with the state government, the city government, you notice how they'll have your name in all capital letters, even on your so-called bills that you receive from your utility companies. This is not there by mistake. But however, if you research, those that have done in-depth research and know the history, how this system was set up, because the system just didn't create itself. You have to ask, what is the source of origin? Where did these concepts come from? Who created this? And what we discovered when you look up Capitis Diminutiu Maxima, where these concepts go back to Roman law or time periods that predate our modern day society, where these concepts derive from, dealt with the loss of status. And this is why names are put on tombstones when you're dead, because you're listed as dead when you're alive. Because the government, they needed a conduit, an interface, an intermediary. So this is the concept of why they created the all caps, the legal person, to for you when you get involved in certain contracts, benefit privileges is what they're also referred to as, or adhesion contracts. You get a driver's license, become a registered voter. They also found out down the road they make you a state employee behind the scenes because there's other government departments that are hidden. People don't understand how to utilize them. I'm still learning about them, like these different, like the Department of Revenue, how the Department of Transportation actually has a higher rank than the local Department of State, or your Secretary of State. Your Department of Transportation has higher jurisdiction, by the way, which is a whole separate department of your state government. Like you have a federal government version, but you have a state government version. And that state government version has a higher jurisdiction or precedent. It's the parent company for, like, say, for Michigan, the Department of Transportation is the parent company over the Secretary of State. But then there's another entity, and it's funny how I went downtown one time and I was asking different departments that they have a syllabus or programs that like a table of contents or index that would give me all the names of all the offices in the building. And it's interesting how these gatekeepers were not willing to be helpful. Like, they want people to be in the dark. They want people to be ignorant, so you can never become free. So you can always remain a slave, and your birth certificate, which is a form of registered security, can be traded on the primary market, the secondary market, and you will never be aware of how to access or take control, take title, or some surrender it back. Eventually, there's a higher level to this that gets into the indigenous aspect, which I've always understood, because there's different people that they fight over different processes, procedures in this movement. But one thing I've always understood, and as I'm getting confirmation, when you make it towards the very end, because these concepts can be very complex and it takes a lot of research, takes reading, effort, you will start to understand how they can tie in to one another. Because I discovered one aspect from learning about benefit privileges, adhesion contracts, just removing the contracts. Now, I know I said a mouthful. You guys may be wondering, too, what does this have to do with the topic of the video? Like, I got off track with the global currency reset or the wealth transfer. What I decided, the reason I told that story is because this is tied in with the event that I attended many years ago, where my older cousin had convinced me. I would have never attended the Pastor Tony King seminars had my cousin convinced me. I had heard of it, but at the time, earlier part of 2009, I wasn't as like motivated, and I just, the timing happened to be right, where I was able to, I'll just say, meet up with someone else who was studying similar information. And I became more curious. But after my cousin had a talk with me, he said, at the time, he called me by my middle name, which is Alan. He said, Alan, you should go because you'll meet more like-minded people. And one thing I'll say, even though things all these years later, I never got funded yet. I know some of you guys wonder, I showed the black card even on this channel. I did a video about it, not only on this channel, but my original channel that is still up. But like I said, I can only access it through StreamYard, through the software that I'm speaking on right now. But the one thing that did work out, that my cousin, I have to give him credit that he was right about, and he studied communications at Cleveland State University, same field my mother went into and actually graduated. I can't remember if he finished it all, but he's very good talker, has very excellent communication skills, by the way. And he encouraged me at the time. Once again, when I've told this story many times, but for those newbies, those who are not aware, this is the only reason that I decided to attend that event, by the way. And they wanted it down the road. I did originally, some people asked me, did I sign a non-disclosure agreement? It was called, at the time, it was called a memorandum of understanding. It was not even referred to as a non-disclosure agreement. So what happened was, as we were waiting for a lot of years, and I felt I didn't get funded, as we were still waiting, as kind of like we are now, but things actually might be maybe getting ready to happen. But I know we've heard that so many times before, so it's one of those types of things. If you've been waiting for a lot of years, you don't get excited anymore, or you just take it for what it is. But I just felt to kind of provide some insight, and this is why I tell the story about myself, to document my journey on this, and where I started from and where we're at now. By the way, I was a lot younger. I was a younger man at the time. I'm much older now. This has gone almost on 20 years since I've been knowingly. I actually attended the private clandestine operation, and it's been actually over 20 years when I started learning about the sovereign information, or the reason I use the term sovereign citizen is because some people can more easily identify with that term, but I don't go by that term. Like I said, to reiterate, I don't claim to be a sovereign citizen. I am still involved in certain contracts, by the way, but I have eliminated certain contracts, and hopefully I can get rid of certain contracts. Maybe one day I can get my complete freedom. And part of that is going to involve getting access to the funding, by the way, which plays an important part, because one of the ways, as I said earlier, they keep you entrapped is through the banking system. Debt is their weapon. But I kind of got sidetracked as I'm telling the story, how this ties in with the global currency reset. Just prior to that, I was part of some programs known as reverse pension programs, and I was connected to what some were referred to as prosperity programs many years ago. I don't really hear that concept anymore, but this was a concept many years ago when people were talking about the dinar revaluation, the global currency reset taking place. The only reason the emphasis was placed on the Iraqi dinar currency is because at the time, they had gone into Iraq. They had gone in, taking their resources. Iraq had a lot of minerals. They established a central bank there. Once their currency, this was actually only meant for certain elite people in the know originally, because the Kuwaiti dollar had revalued years ago. They had done the same thing, went in, basically conquered, took the oil, established the central bank, which is connected to the Federal Reserve. Basically, that's why I tell you guys, watch the movie documentary Money Masters and Monopoly Men. That should be a required. You should still be able to watch those for free on YouTube. If you can't, if you do have the money, I recommend purchasing the older DVDs. Support the people if you do have the money, resources, because there's people that have risked their lives in researching that information to bring that about, because these people, my buddy of mine refers to behind the scenes, he calls the shadow people. He refers to currently as the Amun. I guess, I forget, he told me recently that's a term that means hidden, which is similar to the concept of they're in the shadows. He refers to as the Amun. There's another name that he used, but he said these particular people are in the shadows. They remain hidden. That's why they want to place a lot of emphasis on being private, too, by the way. So this is why I tell the story, to kind of give you guys understanding. I am an unofficial insider. You could say I was kind of like a whistleblower in a way, even though I never really officially went to the news, but I did do YouTube videos, and when they found out, the individual said, that I had went public. Some other individuals had went public in their own capacity, but I did this to document my journey in case something happened to me. I did this as a form of protection, so people would know that I wasn't lying. I wasn't making this up. One of the reasons I did this as a precaution. I also had a plan, if they were not going to get me funded, that I was going to publicly release my documents. And that's why I posted a picture confidently down the road of my black card, to show evidence, because some people thought, of course, I was making that up. When they hear someone talk like this, they think, oh, the story is so outlandish that this person must be crazy, or they're talking gobbledygook or crazy stuff. But I wanted to show, validity behind what I'm saying and sharing with you guys is very, very real. These people are very real. That if you've heard of the term Illuminati, I would say there's different factions. Just like when I kind of went over earlier, there's different elite groups. There are people in the ruling class elite. I just found out not too long ago that the private board members of the Federal Reserve are part of the European elite. By the way, some of them are connected to royalty because when you study the certain bloodlines, they married into royalty. They had humble beginnings when you go way further back. Like the Rothschild family, their original name was they were part of the Bauer family. And what happened was Amschel Bauer they originated in Frankfurt, Germany, by the way, and he commissioned a guy named Adam Weishaupt, who started the Bavarian Illuminati officially in 1776 to infiltrate the Freemasons. So when the plans were discovered many years ago, I don't have the exact date, but back then people used to have their mail delivered by horses. And there was an incident that happened where the mail carrier was struck by lightning and was killed, and the mail was dispersed. And I guess the people that they found out what happened to the mail carrier at the time and got a hold of the letters, and they had discovered Amschel Bauer's letter to Adam Weishaupt. And after they discovered Amschel Bauer's letter to Adam Weishaupt, he had to flee Frankfurt, Germany, and moved in with the Schiff family. By the way, there's a whole story. This is what the documentary Money Masters goes over. Spoiler alert, I kind of gave you guys spill some of the beans, but it tells you how, gives you the history behind how these central banks are set up. Like in Detroit's central bank, Federal Reserve Bank, is by the Eastern Market. That's based out of the Chicago branch, the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. And there's 12 districts throughout the United States, throughout the country, by the way. So this will help you connect the dots. But to make a long story short, when it's important, you find out how these people rose to power, and that a lot of them are into the occult. This is what Pastor Lindsey Williams did admit before he passed away. Rest in peace, too. He did say the elites, they were Satanists, many of them, and are part of the cabal. Because in order to get away with the type of stuff that they do, they control the banking system. They control the money. So I was kind of telling a friend of mine recently they should change the United States Admiralty Maritime flag to the Israeli flag, because that's a whole nother thing. The United States is the military arm of the world. The Vatican is the religious arm. England is the financial arm. All three form a trust unofficially, by the way. So there's people in the shadows, but there's a mechanism to how they created this entire fiat banking system, by the way, which at one time used to have be backed by precious metals until they removed it from circulation. And any presidents that bucked heads or went against their plans were taken out, by the way. Like, Abraham Lincoln with the greenbacks, John F. Kennedy in more recent times, even though that happened a while ago, he implemented Executive Order 111100. Look up what that was. After they assassinated Kennedy, Lyndon Baines Johnson's first order of business, who used to be Kennedy's vice president, who took over as president, well, his first order of business was to rescind John F. Kennedy's Executive Order 111100. Now, you look up the reason why that is. Kennedy had put us on the Treasury, took us off the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve was like a third party. We never really needed the Treasury to print we didn't need the Federal Reserve. We already had the Treasury. But see, they created a scheme. You have to look up the history when the bankers met the royal, well, I won't say necessarily royal families, but elite families met in Jekyll Island, Georgia in 1913, created the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. And then the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917 was further implemented. You have to read and understand the Emergency War Powers Act of 1933, how a lot of those things took place and the connection. And the Erie Railroad versus Tompkins case law of 1938 changed the majority of courts in this country from common law, modern day society. Common law is referred to as equity to private. There's an equity side that does still exist, and you can invoke the equity side. I discovered, by the way, especially one of the ways manually when you remove the contracts. I gave a friend of mine who was a master mechanic. I said, you could literally, you know how to take a whole car apart. I have a friend, he's highly skilled, knows how to do construction. I seen him when I remember years ago, his son had a Dodge Neon. He took the whole door off. His son got into an accident, or he rebuilt it, repainted the door, but he knew how to work on all car parts, transmissions, engines, everything. I said, all it is when you remove, just look at it as when you remove these adhesion contracts like the voter registration, don't be an organ donor, or you just remove yourself, your entity that's connected. It's like taking a car completely apart. You dismantle that they don't have access to. See, they have to have a mechanism to have access to siphon off of you, to suck your blood, to make you a slave, a citizen slave, a subject. A slave is also a subject. This is another reason why there's no such thing as sovereign citizen. That's an oxymoron term. You can't be sovereign and a citizen at the same time, because you look at the definitions. Sovereign means to be self-governed. Citizen means to be a subject or a slave. So those who use that term, that tells you, you have to really do your research. But a citizen is a subject, a slave. But there's a mechanism when you study the history, how we went from in the early 1900s to moving where we're past the 2000s, how they created a way to enslave the people, how to take over. Look up the Erie Railroad versus Tompkins case law of 1938, by the way. So I told the story about the Pastor Tony King seminars and how this opened my eyes up. This was a private clandestine operation, by the way. So I felt originally I did sign what was called a memorandum of understanding, but because I never received any funding, because he promised, he gave an ironclad guarantee. And they also stated that we would receive our packages back. Originally, I was from the 2009 group when we met at the World Marriott Hotel right around the corner from Nickelodeon Studios in Orlando, Florida. The last weekend of December of 2009 going into 2010, by the way. And I submitted a thumb drive, and I was told a certain individual had those documents down the road when he resurfaced many years later. So they wanted me to sign a newer agreement to try to get me locked in, which was actually a non-disclosure that said it specifically on there. But I decided after a few years, I just decided not to rejoin, but I just asked for my package back. I said, if you're not going to fund me, but they said that was a problem because my paperwork, allegedly, of my documents were already submitted to the DTC. And they claimed that I would still get funding or still get something. But then I was later told I wouldn't. So I was kind of like left in limbo at the time. And I wanted a guarantee because he gave a guarantee, an ironclad promise, just like when you've seen those commercials when they tell you, if you're not satisfied after 90 days, then we'll refund you your money. That's an ironclad guarantee. So for individual, you're supposed to trust someone's word. If their word is their bond, and you're supposed to have trust in them, So as you see, they were the ones, when I give, my end of the story, they broke their end of the deal with the original non-disclosure memorandum of understanding that I signed. I know I'm no longer bound to uphold, because when one individual breaks or doesn't uphold their end of the contract, what happens? The contract no longer exists if one person doesn't uphold their end of the deal. But what's happening too is these people, we're coming into a age where these people behind the curtain, and the shadows are also working on a new world order, a one world government. And I also learned about this separately many years ago, even though I no longer attend church, uh, because I learned about my real history, and at the same time, I actually woke up to sovereignty on my own many years ago. You could say I was double red pilled. You could say because um, the elites' children, like I said earlier, they learn the real information. They're sent to private school by invitation only. Many of us grew up in the statutory realm. The public schools also make children eligible for the draft too. It's another way, a contract they get you through the Selective Service Act, other than just the voter registration. I was told by one of my private sources. This is why. Well, I won't touch on that later. That's something else I'll say. But when I learned about my true religion, where the concept of God the Father, the Mother, uh, the Son, Jesus, is based off the concept in our Kemetic history is Asar, Aset, and Heru. Asar was the father, Aset was the mother, Heru was the son, and then later down the road, it got watered down and it changed to trying to remember what it changed to Osiris. Osiris was the father, Isis was the mother, and Horus was the son. That was down the road. But there's books that predate the Bible because the Bible was created by the fathers of the Council of Nicaea. It was mandated states religion. All religions are man-made. There is no superhuman figure that ever walked the face of the earth that has superpowers. The story of Jesus was merged with the story of a man named Yahshua Pinyanda, or whatever, who was a political offender at the time. He was anthropomorphized, and some people during a certain time period didn't want this to happen. They didn't want people, they knew in the future that it would brainwash people, but this is what European conquerors, they wrote themselves. What history is when you break the concepts, the etymology of the word down, is his story. It's his concept. They had to write themselves into history. But there's books that predate the Bible, the Torah, the Tanakh. You have to go by the original text, the original books where they get these stories from, these allegories. For example, the Emperor Imperu, known as the Book of Coming Forth by Day, predates the Pentateuch and the Septuagint. Then the Pentateuch and the Septuagint predate the Torah. They predate that book, and there's other books out there. So you have to understand where these concepts derive from. If you don't have the time periods, because you have to ask the question, who wrote these books? Like I asked someone, my source recently, who wrote the book Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Why don't you have, notice whenever there's an author, like you go on Amazon or whatever, say there's any type of book, you can see a date, you can look up when the date that book was created. People don't ask these questions. They say, oh, it was written by God. Like there's not this superhuman being where we are superhuman beings living in a physical, tangible body. But when you get into science, what actually happens, we're not being taught the real information. Religion is used as a form of control, which they no longer need. But back then, the Bible was created by the fathers of the Council of Nicaea. They decided what books would go in, what stories would be told. And there's books to even back the documented minutes that they took, like trust minutes or court minutes. There's documented records, and there's a particular timeline. People don't even understand how you got to where these different denominations that we have in modern day society. Like I found out my parents were Pentecostal, Church of God in Christ, which comes out of the Protestant movement. They would say Protestant, but Protestant was the Protestant movement. Monk from the Catholic Church went against the Catholic Church named Martin Luther, protested the Catholic Church. They took him captive. They ended up using him as as a monk, but 100 years prior, when you would speak against these things, because it was you could also be killed speaking against the religion, because there were inquisitions. Christians murdered people. They were just as ruthless as what they try to claim the Islamic people were at one time. Now, in modern day society, a lot that believe in Christianity are very passive, have no idea. But the original history, years ago, you were forced to believe. You had to believe. This religion that we call modern day Christianity was forced upon us. It's actually a corrupted version of our spiritual system. What happened is our civilizations, as civilizations rise and fall throughout history, the basic concept that I received when European conquerors came in down the road, when I used to say Alexander the Great, a lot of elders would correct me and say, no, he was Alexander the Greek. There was nothing great about him. But as civilizations, you have to study the time periods that the people existed. When a civilization rises and falls, a conqueror would come in. Sometimes when they conquer a civilization, they take over the belief system. They corrupted the belief system and replaced it with their own. So Christianity, modern day Christianity, the Coptic religion, is a corrupted version of our spiritual systems. And there's people that have come down the road that can articulate this very well, such as Ashra Kwesi, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakanan, Dr. Gerald Massey, Dr. Walter Williams. There's even an archaeologist, a Caucasian man by the name of John Anthony West, that had mentioned that the original Africans were black people, melanated, through archaeological data, archaeological research. A lot of people don't bring that up. The Hebrew Israelites don't go as far back in time. They actually created their own ideology. I don't prescribe to them as well either, because I know the original history and the documents that predate the text. They think that they're going further back than the Bible or doing something special, when it's all been created anyway, because the fathers of the Council of Nicaea had documented minutes where they decided which books would get put in. They created these stories, these allegories, and they distorted our teachings, and they made it a law that you had to believe at one time. So like I said, it's a corrupted version of our spiritual system that originates from us, from the concept of Asar, the father, Aset was the mother, Heru was the son. And then later down the road, I believe Osiris was the father, Isis was the mother, and Horus was the son. So, and there was other civilizations. So they merged the story of Jesus. There was no, because I asked the question, what human being do you know in modern day society, or back then, that could walk on water, can multiply fish out the blue? There's no fucking human being that has those superhuman abilities. So people don't understand that, hey, I have to be harsh or spill the beans. Yes, some people use it as a spiritual system. But we had spiritual systems, but Europeans, they came in and corrupted our belief system. They deceived us. You have to go back to the Council of Nicaea is a start. By the way, the fathers of the Council of Nicaea, once again, there's books. There's certain bookstores that have rare books, and they mention they have the documented minutes where they put all this together. They created how they created the Bible, the books Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Because you have to ask, when did these books come about? When were the time periods? What is the archaeological data to support them? And there's books that are known that go further back. And King James, by the way, you've heard of King James. That was his version of the Bible. And they even have a book that deals with the Royal Book of Records, where they kept evidence. By the way, you can look up the Royal Book of Records that talks about King James. He was king of England at one time. He was a monarch, and that was his version that he created, by the way. So as you can see, they were part of colonialism. When modern day black people don't understand, you're passing down generational curses. You practicing the white man's religion, you're carrying on white supremacy. It's directly tied in. That's why you cannot mix the two. And there's still issues. A lot of black people, minorities to this day, they distorted our teachings. in our spiritual system. The word Christ comes from mummification process. Christ was the caressing of the soul, by the way. The Ten Commandments was plagiarized off the 42 negative confessions of Ma'at. That's where the Ten Commandments comes from. There's no movie with Charleston Heston. All of that is bullshit. The mummification presented a caterpillar, how it turns into a cocoon, that the cocoon eventually matures. This symbolized the soul that leaves the body when you die. It was embalmed by our ancient ancestors and goes into the space they refer to as the heavens when one would make his transition. So you have to understand where these concepts derive from. But that's why I don't personally, when you learn the truth, I don't attend church, because it's just you're reprogramming your mind to be conditioned, because a lot of black people don't understand. Like I said, to reiterate, modern day Christianity is a corrupted version of our spiritual system. It was forced upon us. When you go into the history, the late 1700s, the early part of the 1800s, there was something called the evangelical movement that took place, and then it started to rise. White plantation owners, slave masters, saw they were able to use Christianity to quell slave revolts. Too, there was a connection to Christianity. This is why a lot of in modern day society, even with the Hispanic population, why a lot of the black people have Christian names or similar names. There's a connection that goes back. How these people, there is a connection to the indigenous people as well, because I know there's people out there that try to make it like everything's one-sided. That some people say, "Oh, you're all Indian." No, that's not the case. You have to factor in we're mixed into the population. Some people are mixed. Some people are able to further have a generalized lineage, but they were conquered. The 5 civilized tribes, by the way, were tribes that Europeans took control of. They were used to civilize the other tribes after they captured control and took control of them. By the way, it's where just the little bit you can research further. By the way, but this is a basic example of how they corrupted our belief system. But the problem is when black people, black Americans or African Americans or melanated Americans go to church, you're reinforcing that this white Caucasian man, because in a lot of books, they also make the person look to be like Caucasian. I heard allegedly Michelangelo was commissioned to make this Jesus figure that was based off Yeshua, who was a political offender, who did not have superhuman powers or abilities. His story was anthropomorphized. And that is an actual term, by the way. You can look up what the meaning is. If you've never heard of that, then that proves its validity to what I'm saying. But you can't strike your master because your master looks like your savior. This is the concept. So when they took over, meaning you can't fight your slave master, it's psychological. The more, this is how they keep you divided. They have all these different denominations, Baptist, Methodist, but ask what denomination, what church did Jesus attend? But once again, this figure is anthropomorphized. There is no Jesus. There was no letter J in the English language for several hundred years, by the way. That concept is created. So it's psychological when you have a man that looks like it's a white man that looks like your master. And they also use these mechanisms to keep you more divided, to keep the generational curses happening, but it's a control mechanism. Another thing they do is they make colors are supposed to be a neutral item, and you have to be careful with some of these definitions or concepts too, with how white is described as pure and black is associated with evil, by the way. Just like similar to how they use words of art, like jungle, they'll say jungle makes a person think of a certain type of term instead of saying rainforest. They try to downgrade certain terminology that's been directed at black Americans. instead of rainforest or tropical forest. Europeans will say jungle. You come from the jungle. So you see these concepts with the words, the terminology that we use, we have to be careful with. I'm still learning myself. I'm not an expert, but these are the reasons why I don't attend church. When you learn the truth about these concepts, where they derive from. I was going to do a whole series. I have more notes, but I have to find them. I have stuff from years ago, by the way, but hopefully I've kind of given enough so far. But the topic of this video was supposed to be on GCR wealth transfer. Is it really about to happen? Information I was giving, what I heard is that it's supposedly in the near future, near future, that Bitcoin is supposed to be going up XRP and gold and silver. By the way, in the very near future, and this is going to be part of a start of the wealth transfer. By the way, so that's what I have for you all. Let me acknowledge some people in the comment section. You see here we have Nichelle. Thank you for joining, Nichelle. Okay, we have Mary Saunders. Thank you for joining. Mary, appreciate you guys. So I said a mouthful, but that's the reason why I kind of give you guys a background. Those who follow me for a while, when I tell these stories, you were able to connect the dots and my understanding and why I'm actually an insider to the elites. There's a mechanism to how these elite people, how they operate, by the way. Another thing I didn't touch on earlier is the crown or headpiece that the Pope wears was worn by Asaru, and the canopy he sits on, they got that concept as well from ancient Kemet. By the way, a lot of that stuff is plagiarized. Like the Bible, modern day Bible is plagiarized off of a lot of books prior when you go by the previous books. They also have this information. However, they're not going to release this to the public. By the way, once again, the fathers of the Council of Nicaea, there's books, documented minutes about they put this concept. So this figure, when people say God, one thing I forgot to touch on, this system was originally a matriarchal system. If you look at nature, everything is birthed from a mother, from a woman. That's why we call the earth Mother Nature. Things grow out of it. You look at majority of animals and mother nature, they're birthed from a woman, a female. A female's first energy, by the way. So these concepts have been corrupted, changed around. The colonists, through racism, white supremacy, colonialism, patriarchy. See how this is tied in with religion. They gave you this religion, this concept of Jesus. They said you must believe. At one time, you know, they killed people over this. They burned people at the stake. You know, this is 100 years before Martin Luther protested against the Catholic Church. That's the Protestant movement. That's what the Church of God in Christ comes out of, the Protestant movement started by Bishop Mason. That was an offshoot of the evangelical movements. They only allowed the slaves. When the slaves used to ask, Master, can we go to Sunday go-to meeting? That's why when they tell you the Sabbath is supposed to be on a Saturday, why do black Christians go to church on Sunday? Or why do people go to church on Sunday? You don't know the reasons why, where these concepts derive from. And there's, this is all, you have to do your research and go further back in time. But as you see, they're able to use these as control mechanisms over us. Once again, if your entity, the deity that you're worshiping, you're subconsciously saying in your mind that looks like your master, that's your savior, meaning you can't fight your slave master. So it's psychological, because your Jesus is the white man. When you say Jesus, that's a Eurocentric name, but there was no Jesus. There was a story they merged based off a person, allegedly Yahshua Pinanda, who was a political offender. It's the reason why they merged the story to anthropomorphize into a godlike figure or deity that people worship today. That's based off our ancient concept that we had of Asar, Aset, and Heru, which later down the road became Osiris, Isis the mother, and Horus the son. You know, but once again, God the Father. Then there was they switched around, and you have to study monotheism and polytheism. Friend of mine is more skilled in certain regards, but I've got enough to understand. You know, I tell her I don't prescribe to religion anymore. Religion is man-made. So all that Hebrew Israelite stuff, their ideology in more recent times, he sent me a video that's created, but still based off Christianity is based off the conquerors that came in, the fathers of the Council of Nicaea. These are where these concepts came from. It's where it derived from. So you're studying, you're living a lie. I just said I can't live a lie. That's why I personally don't attend church anymore, because people are not being taught the real information. On top of that, they're being taught it's just to feel good. For slaves at the time, they would go to church to feel better. Okay, we got somebody in the comment section says, you've been missed. I would like for you to hook up with Dr. Kia. She would love to hear your wisdom and help you awake the sheep. Okay, excellent. Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I actually met Dr. Kia before. She's from Cleveland, like myself, by the way. She did message me a while ago, but we never got a chance to rap with each other or converse. I'm glad. I like the work she's doing. I heard she got shadow banned as well. By the way, YouTube, there's certain information they don't want, out here. It's like they consider it to be a threat. But it's funny how they'll allow certain information to circulate, but other individuals, they'll shut down. I'll just leave it at that. It's a control mechanism behind the curtain, what they're doing. But I'm appreciative to kind of be back. I may go live on my other channel since I can't reach just as many people or more people over there. Maybe like a rehash of this video, by the way. But that's my whole concept, and I'm glad I'm able to share what I was able to share. I appreciate you guys for continuing to follow me, continue to rock with me. Been going on for how long was Oh, I'm going to get ready to shut the video down. And once again, thank you guys for joining me. I'm your host, John Dorsey at Dorsey's Resource. This was the new channel at Dorsey's Resource 873. So if you like the video, don't forget to thumbs up, rate, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, take care. Peace.